Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you live from the SCC studios out of White Bear Lake. And through a cooperative agreement, this program is also simultaneously broadcast to those studios out of the Roseville viewing area, the CTV studios. As a result of this cooperative effort, this program reaches out to and serves approximately 28 communities in the Northeast metropolitan area. Now today is April 22nd, so if you're watching on this date, the number for call-ins is on the screen, and we encourage you to call in with any questions or comments, because after all, public access TV is the citizens' TV. Now, if you find yourself watching our program on a different channel in the Stillwater area or St. Paul or out of Town Square, well, we're rebroadcast, and so it's not a live show, so you won't be able to call in. However, you can either reach me on Facebook 24/7, or later on we'll have the website of the organization that's here this evening so that you can contact them via the internet. And so tonight, I think you're going to enjoy our program. We are going to be talking about a topic that you hear a little bit about in the mainstream media, but they don't really give a lot of lip service to it. And they really should, or maybe they don't want to, since, well, mainstream media is basically run by the corporations. And so what we are talking about tonight is the move to amend. The move to amend the Constitution to abolish corporate personhood. And they also have an event coming up in May that's free, so we're going to tell you more about that as well. But with that said, I want to welcome my guests here this evening. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Yeah. And now I would like you each to take a moment and introduce yourself to our viewers and let them know a little bit who you are and how you became involved in the move to amend, because people are probably wondering, well, how did you even hear about the organization, or why are you involved? So why don't you go ahead and get started? Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I'm Barbara Girton. I'm from South St. Paul, and my work was in anti-military. I really felt like there was other approaches to the conflicts in our world, and as I looked at 60% of our discretionary budget going to the military, it seemed there must be something behind that. And of course, there's a lot of big military companies that are giving a lot of political contributions. And so as I dug deeper, I thought, you know, I need to go to the very basic level, that we have a problem with our democracy, that there's too much corporate control.
And I think that we have probably a lot of viewers out there this evening that probably would agree with you. And we've had other programs here on Off the Record News where we've actually discussed some of those very issues and talking about the big military complex and the impact it has on really not finding resolution, peaceful resolutions, because there's such a push for using armaments because there's big money in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's many viewers out there saying, okay, I think I understand part of that topic. So thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Robin Monahan. I consider myself new to political activism, and I would say that I was pushed into it by my older brother, who in January of 2010, when the Supreme Court passed the Citizens United legislation, or ruled in favor of Citizens United, giving corporations constitutional rights, as it were. It's a subject I've, since 2010, I've explored deeply and have been participating with Move to Amend since 2010. And I'm very excited to be here in Minnesota, where I was born and raised, and currently living in Shoreview. And so
Good.
Let's get on with it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and of course this program is out being broadcast right this moment to Shoreview. So excellent. Maybe your neighbors are watching you.
Oh, one would hope so.
And go ahead, and my last guest, please.
Hi, I'm Virg Bieland, and I'm from the Duluth area, Move to Amend. And we have other affiliates in the state, in Rochester, Grand Rapids, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm missing one?
That's it.
That's it? Okay. And I'm retired, and I was thinking of kind of 3 issues that really were bothering me. And I was going to try to help out in one of those areas, the environmental, I was thinking. That inequity gap is another, and the other one is just the massive influx in our political process. It's growing by 10s and 20s. And so I was looking around, and I just kind of, by accident, thought, Move to Amend, that sounds interesting. And so I inquired. I happened to run into Robin and Laird, and they came up to Duluth, and they helped us grow the Duluth area Move to Amend. And there is nobody that's more motivational than Robin and Laird were, flat out. And since then, I have seen nobody that addresses the situations that does it any better than Move to Amend. So right now, my main point, if money is speech, then speech is no longer free. And that's a huge concern of mine.
Yeah, and certainly I share that concern with you as well, with all 3 of you, is that if you have to pay for your speech to be heard, and that's the only way that people will know what you have to say, well, then free speech is non-existent. I mean, we're lucky here on public access TV. We have some ability to get our message out without corporate influence. But on the other hand, we also have to hope that Congress always keeps Comcast or other corporations motivated to want to support public access TV. So in the end, it still does come down to what our elected officials do. And I know we're going to show some video later on where that issue is addressed about the need for elected officials who have a commitment to having speech free from corporate influence. So I think that that'll be fascinating for our viewers because, again, these are topics that we've touched on in many other shows in other aspects, but this kind of brings it all together in a way that they probably never expected they'd be able to hear about. So this will be exciting. Now, who would like to start out and tell us a little bit about the organization, you know, like when it was formed, what was the original dream, you know, what's the vision here? I mean, we got kind of a feel for it, but what's it in a nutshell?
All right, I'd like to talk about that.
Good.
So there were folks out in California prior to the Citizens United decision who were concerned about our democracy. As soon as the decision came down, they said we've got to really get active. So they launched Move to Amend at that point. And that was about the same time you were thinking of you needed to do something. So they kind of were birthed at the same time. The walk really helped Move to Amend get on the road, so to speak, move across the country. So today, it's not an organization solely to work for amending the Constitution, but it's a democracy movement. It's really about engaging, as you said, all the issues you've probably talked about. It touches every single one of them. So it's collaborating with all sorts of organizations working on other issues, diversity to really get into the collaborative process, other voices, not just 3 white folks, but to really reach out to others. And Black Lives Matter, 15 Now, all those that are working on issues that are really important. And what I was thinking about when you were talking about the scope of the organization is that, one, it's a good thing that it's not just one issue-driven organization, because oftentimes what can happen to an organization where there's just one single issue is either they accomplish that issue or
and then they die out, or that they never accomplish that one issue and they die out. On the other hand, to diversify a little bit and have more some other issues that are also within the mission of the core issue, it's good to keep the organization alive as long as you don't stray too far, because you stray too far, you get too many issues, then you don't get anything done. So it sounds like you've kind of got it pared down to exactly that good mixture of having a number of issues to keep people motivated and interested and engaged, because you really, with this kind of an organization, from my experience, you need to have people engaged, because if you don't have that engagement, what else do you have? Otherwise, is it really democracy?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a lot of collaborative
Yes.
effort working with
Good.
people in different issue areas. Across the country, there's affiliates in every state, and as Verge said, there's 5 here in Minnesota. Some states probably have more than 5. I know Ohio has lots of them. So that we really believe that the driving piece behind this is that in the end that we would have a constitution that really makes it clear that corporations, legal entities, are not people, that we the people means human beings, and that the constitutional rights are meant for human beings. Freedom of speech, this money is speech, then is not one of those that is attributed to non-humans.
Right, and for our viewers out there, this whole idea about corporations being people, you know, they may be thinking, well, how did it ever get to that point? Well, you know, I don't know a lot of the history about it, but I do know that way back when sometime, I don't know, was it the 1800s or
1886?
something? Yes, that there was this new recognition of a corporation as an entity that would then shield an individual from liability in the business world. And it was a structure. It was a way to structure your business, a way to structure how your taxes are treated, how to encourage businesses to start so that the individuals behind them wouldn't have the liability to encourage them to have businesses, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
And in fact, Barbara and I, we were talking about that just early before the show, and it's exactly, in fact, what were you saying about the words corporation and the word corporations doesn't even exist in our Declaration of Independence, nor our Constitution, and they were illegal for 100 years after, as they were illegal for 100 years after the American Revolution. So this is a new thing that has developed, and then the frosting on the cake was Citizens United.
Right.
But you were making some thoughts.
Well, there were corporations, but they had a term that they were to only last for 5 years until their purpose was completed. It was a whole different organization. But then when they got corporate personhood in 1886, it was a case, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad.
Yep.
That's what really moved them into the sovereignty. The Constitution says we the people, we are sovereign, we make the rules. But when corporations are lifted to that same category, then they make the rules as
Right,
well.
right,
And so how
because-
can
yes.
we compete?
Yes.
So it was in 1886 that they were really given that status.
Interesting. And I know that our viewers out there, they're probably thinking, well, that just seems so ridiculous to
Yeah.
think that corporations are people. And yet, if you look at so many of the rights that corporations have, they are similar to us as individuals. And then when you couple that together with the money to be able to buy the speech, then it basically drowns out all the rest of us little
Exactly.
guys who don't have the money to buy the airtime. And that's where then you have that issue of how that all enters into the election process and into political dialogue. And I think that if you watch carefully the mainstream media, it's so easy to see that over and over and over again in every single newscast that you watch. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So now, Robin, tell us a little bit about the walk, because I know you were very involved in the walk to bring awareness to people throughout America about this issue. And I know some of our viewers may have heard about the walk across America, but you know, I know they would love to hear the story directly from you.
Okay, and I'd be happy to do that. If you will perhaps give me a nudge if I've waxed too eloquently for too long.
Okay, I'll do that.
But, yeah, and earlier reference to my brother nudging me in the direction of political activism. We both heard over the radio in January of 2010 that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Citizens United. And actually in the language says that corporations are persons under the law entitled to constitutional rights. Well, constitutional rights are different than the privileges that are legislated to give corporations an advantage or to limit their advantage, if you will, because legislation can go either way. But constitutional rights are entirely different. Constitutional rights for human beings are inalienable.
Right, absolute.
Absolute. We can't give them away, we can't sell them, and we get them when we're born in the United States. And so what that does is give corporations power that they hadn't had before, because the entire Bill of Rights can, in fact, be invoked if they need to. Usually they use the Fourth Amendment and the 14th Amendment most. But for example, if a corporation wants to move into a small town to set up a business, and the small town says, no, we don't want your business here, it wouldn't meet what our town represents to us. Well, the corporation can invoke the 14th Amendment and say, as a person, I am being discriminated against. And he will take the town to court, and because corporations, among constitutional rights and all of their legislative rights, are immortal. Mm-hmm. I don't know that any of us at this table are immortal. I haven't felt immortal since I left Vietnam 40 years ago. But in any case, corporations have immortality. They have huge financial pockets that far surpasses any individual or even towns or cities. And they also have limited liability. Mm-hmm. Human beings don't have that. What this Citizens United has done is give corporations, made them super entities, superhumans, if you will, super persons, that natural human beings can't possibly compete against in court or in the political sphere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally drowns out our democracy.
Right, and I think that an important distinction that you've made with regard to, you know, legislative actions versus the constitutional rights.
Right.
I mean, because that is very distinct. Mm-hmm. And I liked it that you said that, you know, you're born with your constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
And that's an important point to have. Now, I think this would be a good point to start with our first clip, because that clip, I believe, starts off with your brother speaking. And wouldn't that be nice to introduce him as the fourth person here, a guest at the table, huh?
I'm honored.
That's right,
yeah.
Exactly. So, would somebody like to set this up a little bit? Or should we just go ahead and play it? Or
I can say a little bit about it. This was filmed in Nevada, I believe. Fairly early into our trip. We started on May 16th of 2010. And it was filmed by a person that we had only met the day before. And we were introduced to him by somebody whose house we had spent the night in.
Okay.
That we had met at church on a Sunday morning, and he happened to be the I won't say he was the priest, but he was the person giving the sermon. He was a lay minister. And we just introduced ourselves and told him what we were doing, and he knew the issue right away.
Yeah, yeah.
And certainly was willing to share his space with us for several nights as we walked through the area. But he contacted his friend who had been doing some video for political persons, and I can't remember who exactly. Who might it be in Nevada? I don't want to go there. In any case, so he set this thing up. He kind of laid it out on a storyboard that he drew in the air for us and told us what he was going to do, and we did the whole thing.
Well, and so this is an excellent example of grassroots in action. So let's get started with our first clip.
Of the need to amend the Constitution to abolish corporate personhood. I'm Laird Monahan. I'm 69 years old. I'm a retired merchant seaman and a Vietnam vet.
Hi, my name is Robin Monahan.
My brother and I are 500 miles into a walk across the United States to raise the awareness of the American people of the need to pass a constitutional amendment to abolish corporate personhood. The Supreme Court ruled in the Citizens United versus Federal Elections Committee that corporations were, for the sake of the law, legal persons, and that, furthermore, money was speech, and therefore corporations were entitled to spend as much money as they wanted in our federal elections, in all elections, from village council right on up to the presidency. In order to tell the Supreme Court that we don't agree, we have to pass a constitutional amendment. Our Declaration of Independence, the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, which is the bedrock of our Constitution, says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equal and endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The second sentence of that paragraph is very important. And it says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among people and derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. From the consent of the governed. That's us, that's you and me. And we do not consent to have our government dominated by corporations. Corporations today, by either intimidation or, in my opinion, outright bribery, influence every legislative act that comes through Congress. But we have to elect those candidates who will promise to be loyal to we the people and will promise to pass an amendment to the Constitution to abolish corporate personhood.
Well, there you go. And that was, I think he said it very well and set the stage for why this is so important. And when he's talking about how corporations really have an impact at all levels of government, I was thinking to myself, even at a municipal level, you can have corporations who, say for instance, under like Minnesota state law, that they don't qualify for tax increment financing because they don't meet the but-for test, for instance, but they can go to the legislature and petition to the legislature to bend the rules for them. And that happens in Minnesota. And that's another example where then they go to the city council and the city council says, oh yeah, we're happy to pass a resolution to pass on to the legislature to say we support this in our community. So basically, they're enabling then the legislators to do exactly what he was talking about.
Exactly.
And some other examples that you folks can maybe offer to our viewers where you think that, maybe on a local level that, people can identify with this. Also, I have some charts that you had sent over to me too that we can share with our viewers as well. Some of the data.
Yeah, I would add, this is one that fits right down to the city courthouse level, and that is we, the people, have equal access under the law. And if I happen to be a big auto company and I'm a multinational corporation and somebody sues me, and let's say it's Barbara sues me because the faulty ignition hurt me. If that happens, all I need to do is let that drag on until Barbara no longer is alive. I can live forever, I can win. When she dies, the case is done. That isn't equal access to our court system. That's a very unequal access.
Right, and also on the, in conjunction with that, and I see this oftentimes in the court system, being an attorney, that those who have the money are able to hire greater number of experts, that they're able to protract the case longer as time goes on.
Yep.
And even though they may not actually have the better side of the case, in the end, they may be the winners because they were able to indeed outlast the other person on the other side of the case. So if one person on the one side is a corporation that's well heeled, and it's that individual, as you in your example, who is suing the car manufacturer, well, after a while, the money runs out or the life runs out because depending upon the situation. And again, it goes back to that equal justice
I win.
issue. Yeah, that's right. You win, you big hot dog, you.
Yes. Well, here's another way that taxpayers lose. It was last week, it was reported Walmart costs taxpayers $6.2 billion in public assistance because of low wages that are paid to their employees.
Right, yes.
And so we end up paying, in essence, the makeup part of an employee in order for them to be able to have a living, pay the rent,
Right.
buy the food.
Right, exactly. And for our viewers out there, if you haven't been keeping up with this particular issue, what they've found is that because the wages are at a certain low rate, what that does then is that the employees, because they're making that low earnings, they actually then qualify for various benefits available through social services, in which case then that means then the general taxpayer base pays for those services, when in reality perhaps maybe they should have a higher wage, and then they wouldn't be, they'd actually be paying more taxes, right? And they wouldn't be taking, having that need for having to use the social services in order to meet their core needs.
Yeah. In that case, we're not subsidizing their employees, we're subsidizing
Walmart.
the Walmart
Oh,
company.
yeah, it is
So
absolutely.
that's what it is.
Yeah, indirectly
Yes,
it
yes.
absolutely is. That's for sure. Now I have up on the screen comparing the growth of U.S. family incomes. And this is the first half of the slide. Now, would somebody like to talk about this slide here a little bit to explain exactly what this is?
I think it's important to look at the year 1947 to 1979. During that period after the war, you can see that different categories. I don't know if the viewers can see on the left-hand side, the left-hand
Right, 'cause-
flower
yeah, right here.
is the lower
So that says the bottom 20%.
The bottom 20%.
So that's the bottom 20% of earners, correct?
Right.
And so you can see that between 1947 and 1979, that the bottom 20% of earners, it shows you that their incomes increased by 118%, correct?
Yep, and I think the thing to notice is they're all quite equal.
Right.
Everybody was growing together.
Right, and then the next symbolic flower here is the second 20%, and then you've got the middle 20%, the fourth 20%, the top 20%, and the top 5%. Now take a look at this particular number here, the top 5% of earners. Their incomes went up 86%. Now we're going to move this slide so that you can see for the next time period what this is, okay? And we're going to adjust this so you can actually see it. So this is from 1979 to 2008. Now take a look at the top 5% earners. Okay, that's 73%, but the top 1% earners, 224%, and those people who are in the bottom 20%, -7. They're actually losing income, actually losing income. And then the second 20%, 6%. So you can see how this is really a much different type of curve than what you saw for the previous period of time. And I think when our viewers see this, it really helps to identify some of those income disparities as a result of some of these changes in the way the paradigm have become.
Yes, yes.
And then one thing that's important to, if you take a look at that graph, or as we did, we ended up, you could see that not only as far as where the different categories go, those numbers are, someone may say, well, where do they get those numbers? They're from the U.S. Census Bureau. So they're valid numbers. The graphics make it look, I suppose it's a bit, it's not misleading at all. The numbers are accurate. But they're from the U.S. Census Bureau. And then it says, well, it's only 2008. They've been worse since. They haven't gotten better. That's continued.
Right. And then I have another where we have a corporate income graph. This is a hopefully our viewers can somewhat see it. I think that with the lines being colored, that it gives you the impression, so you can kind of get what it is. But that first on the left, that particular graph is average household income before taxes. And so you can see that pretty much everything is sort of level at the bottom, and then there's just one category that is just going up and up and up, and that is the top 1%. Everybody else is pretty leveled out over the years.
And the top 20% does win out over inflation, but
That's
not
correct.
but not by a lot. And then you're right. All the rest, they're pretty much fighting to stay even. And along with those numbers, during that time period, that we've got people going back double incomes. People are both sides of the family are working and paying for childcare in order for themselves to stay flat. So that includes that level number. That includes the fact for families that these both of those incomes are going into to make that happen.
And these numbers, I should let our viewers know, are in 2007 dollars, and the data is from the Congressional Budget Office. So it isn't just something that somebody whipped up in the back room. It's actually from the Congressional Budget Office. And then the second slide that we have there is the change in share of income versus 1979 after taxes. So then this basically is showing what their net income is, whereas the first one was before taxes, the gross.
And this is the change. Yep. So the change is there.
So again, when you're thinking about taxes and the collection of revenue through the income tax system, whether or not if it's an individual or corporation or whatever, I mean, this shows you for households, for individuals, it shows you with those folks who are the top 1% that the taxes really do not have the same impact on them as the folks who have a lesser income. And in many ways, that seems very regressive, doesn't it?
It is, and then one of the other things that, if we had time for the graph, or we used, if you took a look at what corporations have paid in the past, it used to be from 1950s, late 1950s, it was their share of the federal budget was 33%, and that share is now less than 10%. And so in order to make that up, somebody has to pay for that makeup, and it's going to be payroll taxes, and it's going to be individual income taxes, or we pass it on to our children. There's your choice.
Right.
And can we also add that when we ask the question, well, why or how did this happen? I have to suggest that is there any doubt in anybody's mind that in the legislative process that regulates these taxes and advantages or disadvantages, is there any doubt about who the legislation favors?
Exactly.
It's obviously the 1%. And those 1% are obviously, could certainly be represented or work for the very largest of corporations. And it's just another indication that the corporations, with their financial influence, have literally bought our government. I would also suggest all three branches of government, judicial, legislative, and executive, to their own advantage. And so the people that you and I get to vote for do not actually represent us. We, the people, they do in fact represent the very largest of corporations and the very wealthiest of families.
And I think, oftentimes when we're talking about corporations, people are thinking we're just talking about for-profit corporations, but there are also nonprofit corporations, and there are different types of nonprofits. So there's the nonprofit that's working in your community, doing community deeds. That's a different type of nonprofit than the big medical conglomeration that's a nonprofit.
Precisely.
And I think that our viewers will probably recall seeing many articles about the type of salaries and bonuses and benefits that CEOs for big, huge medical nonprofit organizations have received, and the impact of those particular organizations on legislation for health care, whether or not it's at the state level or the national level. They have a huge impact in what it is that has come out of, Congress when it comes to who and how are we going to have medical care for everybody. And so in the end, you say, okay, everybody needs to buy insurance, but it still doesn't mean that anybody has medical health care, because there is a distinction.
Insurance is not medical care.
That's exactly right. And you notice how on the mainstream media they always miss that point?
And just
Go ahead.
something that I would wonder if your viewers know, or if you know, what is a double Irish with a Dutch sandwich?
I do not know.
If you were a corporation, you would, because that is a tax evasion measure. And it's the reason we have the Cayman Island banks. It's the reason we have banks in Morocco and Ireland. Trillions of money are being taken out of our economy, put in those banks, and it's a shelter so that too many corporations pay zero in taxes. They pay nothing, and some of those get money from out of our tax system. They take our money, and they're making the most profits in the history of the earth.
Right.
That's right.
Yes. And how can you have an economy growing when you have people who are not able to buy, or they've lost faith that they can buy in the future. You have to really watch their money. There's no way an economy can grow. And the people with all the money at the top they cannot spend enough to be able to buy enough groceries, enough cars, enough, furniture or whatever to get the economy going.
Yes.
So the idea is all mixed up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point, because if you don't have any discretionary income, you're not buying the consumer goods that our economy is built on.
That's right.
Gee whiz! Now we're wondering, why aren't we selling houses? Why aren't we selling cars? Well, gee whiz! I think you found the reason.
Right, and people don't have faith in the economy, so they're not going to spend. They're going to save. And then people are still fearful. What's going to happen? They might have some retirement, but like in 2008, a lot of people's retirement was half of what they expected, and then they're back in the workforce again.
Yeah.
And banks, do they care? No, they got bailed out. We paid them.
Oh, and they're a corporation.
And they're a corporation.
Oh my goodness, imagine that. Well, you know what? We have a second clip. I think this would be an excellent time to show our second clip. And near the end of it, I know it talks about the need for elected officials who will support the abolishment of corporate personhood.
This walk is only about corporate influence in our political process. We are not against corporations. Corporations are an important part of our economic system. Corporations provide efficiency in manufacture. They provide innovation and research to develop new products. They're a very important part of our economic process. While corporations are important in our economy, I in fact support corporations by making purchases of goods and services that I use. And I don't mind the profit that they collect when I make purchases. Like my brother, when I heard the January 21st ruling of the Supreme Court that gave corporations personhood, I was incredibly disappointed and angry. And being from Minnesota, when we have strong emotional feelings, we usually go lie down until it passes, which is what I did. But then a few days later, my brother called and said, "Hey, I'm going to walk across the United States because I'm so damn mad that corporations are considered persons." And I thought that was a pretty cool idea, but because of my responsibilities at home, it was not something that I could just run away and do. But when I told my family what Laird was doing, and that my brother thought that I could help him in some way, they were very supportive, and they, in a sense, all agreed to step up and take care of business while I was away if I wanted to do that. So very shortly, I did call my brother and told him that I would be willing to walk, and so he put this walk together, and we're doing it, and we're 25 days into it, and we hope at the far end that we have people walking with us, and that we have people applauding the idea of having an amendment that abolishes corporate personhoods. Now, there is something that individuals can do at a local level. If every municipality would pass a resolution that supports abolishment of corporate personhood and sent that resolution on to their county and to their state legislators and to their senators and to the President of the United States, that kind of resolutions from every municipality would help members of our government to have stronger backbones, knowing that they had full support of municipalities that represent the people.
Excellent action plan. Having been a former mayor of a municipality, oftentimes organizations would come to us They have resolutions passed that would then go on to the next level to show support in the community of the elected officials at that level for the folks at the next level, so that they could feel that they weren't out in left field someplace, that they had somebody behind them watching their back. So I think that's a great action to ask the elected officials out there in the other municipalities that are watching this to say, hey, let's look into that and see if this is something we can do. Because it certainly is better than passing a resolution to tell the legislature that you would like them to bend the rules on tax increment financing.
Right.
So, you know, that's my opinion. So it looks like you have some comments on that.
Yes, because here in the state, 3 cities have passed a resolution, the city of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth.
Okay.
And we have yet to work on the suburban areas, but that is where some folks are working in the southern part of the metro area, going to their city councils. So that is a very definite way to get some conversation going, getting more people informed. We really need to have conversations in all of these communities about this.
And I'm thinking that this would be a good time that if our viewers are thinking, well, yes, I do want to find out more. I want to talk to some people about this. I want to go to, she said something about a free event. Well, let's pull up the screen so we can talk a little bit about where you can go to meet folks who are talking about this issue, have some fellowship, go to a free event. Maybe you'll find that you'll want to get involved as well. So let's pull up our screen here. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about what this celebration's all about.
All right. Well, of course, it's about the Monahan brothers, and we have Robin here. They're a long walk across the country. So we are going to be having a call to action. Not everybody can walk across the country, but they can certainly inspire us to do more. So that's part of the celebration. We're also pairing that with, it's the 129th birthday of the corporate person. Of that case in 1886. And so we're going to do a little slideshow on how that corporate person has grown up and became a train wreck.
Okay.
With Citizens United.
Yes, from toddler to train wreck.
Right,
that's
right.
great.
That's right.
That's
That's
great.
right.
I think I want to come just so I can see that.
Do come. And we're doing another thing that's really interesting. We're doing a simultaneous event. And so Verge can talk about...
in Duluth.
Yes, okay.
In Duluth at the same time on the 16th, and it's going to be at the Red Herring, and it's on 1st Street in Duluth, and people will know where to go for that. And it's from 1 to 4, and it's going to be done at the same time, and we're going to have multiple screens from, and then I would like to hope that we will have spots along Robin and Laird's Walk calling in as well. That would be a real cool thing, because they went all the way, they walked all the way across America. I just had to drive from Duluth to be here, but they walked all the way across. And then if I could,
yes,
one thing that I think everybody should recognize is that everybody is. Robin walked across the country, but everybody is an activist. Barbara is working with the St. Paul movement, and that's happening. But are they an activist to cause something to happen, or are they an activist for things to stay the same? That's what I'm thinking. So people should ask themselves that question. They are an activist, too.
Right. You know, I never thought of it from that perspective, that if you sit back and do nothing, you are being an activist, but you're an activist to keep the status quo. So isn't that a fascinating idea? Now, I understand that we have a caller on the line, so let's take our callers' questions or comments. Hello.
Hello. Mayor Longrie, thanks for bringing this show out, because I see nothing of this issue on commercial media, and it's like seems like one of the most significant issues there are, and it speaks to why there is so much corruption in politics, especially on the federal level. When I'm hearing all this stuff about how much money is involved and how many rights they have and freedoms they have to spend whatever they want or to buy the candidate, My question to these people, because you have researched this significantly, has this affected Minnesota politics at the federal level? And I'm talking about our U.S. senators and our U.S. representatives. And how does this affect? Is this more an issue that is more corrupting the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or is this something? That where's the Tea Party on this? It seems like the Tea Party would be with you on this one. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good questions.
I would like to respond to part of that,
Yes.
and then we'll invite comments from Barbara and Verge also. Move to Amend describes itself as nonpartisan. And in fact, both of our major political parties are vulnerable to the money offered them for their re-election campaign or as personal favors or whatnot. And to the extent that in my opinion, we don't have a two-party system. We have a one-party system that's totally pro-business. And that's unfortunate because it's just another symptom of how democracy has gone away from our political process. Now, while I see that as a political or as a personal opinion that we have only a one-party system, I'm sure if you talk to the Democratic National Party or the Republican National Party committee, that they would say, oh no, we're vastly different. But the fact is, both parties work for the same corporations.
You've got the incumbent party.
Oh,
There's that
okay.
too. Yes. Yes.
true, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, and when you have someone like Representative Rick Nolan, who's come back into Congress and saying, what is so different is that now I need to spend, what is it, 2/3 or 3/4 of his
I
time?
think it's 2/3. I've heard him
2/3 of his
say, but
time
it's-
raising money? We, as our taxpayers, are paying their salary, and we're paying their salary to raise money and not to be doing the people's work. There's
then-
something really wrong about that system. And then you might talk about the race, because
Yeah.
the caller asked about the races here in Minnesota. It
Yeah,
really
I-
was affected.
Well, it was, and just something that the caller also asked about is, what about like conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats? From 71% to 87%, the masses of people support this. Across the board, libertarians, Green Party, 71 to, it passed in, when they put it on the ballot, 13 times in Wisconsin, in Scott Walker's district. It passed in Utah and Montana, where it's a very conservative district, and it's passed in liberal as well states. So that's also okay. Rick Nolan is going to be introducing this legislation at the federal level on April 29th.
Oh,
And
that's
so
okay.
Yes.
his first piece of legislation when he went back, his first one, this was it. That's what he did first, and it didn't go anywhere. It didn't get up past the out of the committee. But he's bringing it up again, and this is on April 29th, and we'll be hearing more about that.
Right. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about a comment that Representative Nolan made. In this past election, he said there was so much outside money that came into that campaign from sources he had no control over, he had no knowledge of. He said he felt like he lost control of the campaign, the conversation. It was something he wasn't between he and his constituents any longer.
So not even are the people not having their voices heard, even the candidates
Right.
are getting outshouted.
Right. It's just the machines are the ones that are running the whole show, and whoever's behind them, cranking the wheels.
Who's behind the curtain?
Yeah, who's behind
Yeah.
the curtain?
I hope we've answered your caller's
Yeah.
question. If we haven't, I encourage him to go onto the Move to Amend site, and he can find the St. Paul area
Yes.
link and email us. I would be glad to have more of an exchange.
That's a great idea. Well, let's bring our screen up again that has that website on it. And so for our viewers out there, if you didn't catch it the first time, make sure that you have your pen and paper handy, and you'll want to write it down. And don't forget about the event on May 16th here in St. Paul at the East Side Freedom Library at 1105 Greenbrier Street. And this is from 1 to 4, and so you'll want to, be there so you can watch the presentation about the corporation going from toddler to train wreck.
And
We
everyone is
gave it a
welcome.
new title.
And everyone is welcome.
Yes.
It's important. And we're having
Yes.
that same thing happening in Duluth. So everybody is welcome. We like to see everybody there.
That's excellent. Now, we have about 5 minutes left of our program. Can you believe it's gone by
No,
so
it's
quickly?
amazing.
So I'm sure there's a couple of other highlights that you want to make sure that you get out to our viewers in our last 5 minutes. So I want to give you that time to do that. So whether or not if it's where do you go from here, what are your goals for getting this passed, whatever you like.
I would like to talk a little bit about here in the state. Senator John Marty has introduced a bill last session, the 88th session. It passed the Senate. It did not pass in the House. So that was Representative Raymond Dean, D-E-H-N. So now this session, they have reworked the bill a little bit to make it a little more educational, but they have not introduced it. So as constituents and your viewers, we need to put pressure on them. So next session, well, we know the presidential campaign has already started. We can already feel it. People are going to start to get more and more aware of this issue. And I think next year, if we can put some pressure on them, they will get it introduced here in the state. And we'd like to get it passed in the state. So what the state piece does is to request Congress to write the words for the amendment. And when 32 states, or 34 states have made that request, then they need to do that.
Oh, I see, okay.
And then once they have the language crafted, it's passed at that level, then it comes back to the states to be ratified. So then 38 states would need to ratify that amendment language for it to become part of the Constitution. So we need everyone's help getting a hold of their elected officials, saying this is a really, really important matter. We need people to join the affiliates. And that information you can find on the website. You can link to us. Yeah, it's helpful to have organizations that people are involved with to endorse that, to endorse our resolution.
Get their city council members pass that resolution.
Yes, and then let us know so that when we report to Representative Marty, we can show and demonstrate the growing support for this.
Now, is there like a model resolution
Yes.
for city councils
Yes.
to pass?
Yes.
Well, see, look how easy that is. You even have a model resolution.
And then if I could add,
Yes,
in
go ahead.
Duluth, we're going to have it on the ballot in the fall.
Oh, good.
The city council has already approved this at the city council level, but we'd like the voters to get an opportunity to say what their opinion is on it too. So it will be called an advisory resolution. It'll be on, we're pretty certain, we're asking, and we're getting some cooperation from the city council to get this on the fall ballot in Duluth.
That's great. That's excellent. Well, maybe like in 6 or 9 months, we'll have to have you come back so that you
Report.
can give an update, a report, and keep the ball rolling.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I really want to thank you very much for coming on the program. And one last time before we end up the show, I want to put the screen up to remind folks again of the event, because we may have some folks who just tuned in, and so they may have missed this. So again, that's May 16th from 1 to 4 at the East Side Freedom Library. What an excellent place to have it, the Freedom Library.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
Where there's going to be the celebration of the Monahan brothers, walking the walk, talking the talk of democracy. And again, this is free. And if you have other questions, or you want to get that copy of a sample resolution that you can encourage your city council members to pass, the website is as you saw on the screen there. So anyway, folks, well, really thank you so much for coming on the program and talking about this topic and sharing your enthusiasm, and go get them for this issue for the citizens.
Thank you,
thank
Diana.
you for having
Thanks for
us.
having us here.
Yes,
I appreciate
thank you
it.
so
I really
much.
do. Thank
No
you.
problem. This is an excellent show. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
So,
It was.
Yes.
and to our viewers, I hope you enjoyed the program as well. And stay tuned for the next program, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.